Well, welcome everybody to the 19th annual MLK Observance hosted by Silverton Grange and Silverton People for Peace. My name is Kayla Catino. I am the president of the Silverton Grange. And for those that you don't know, the Silverton Grange has been around for a few decades, and the Grange's mission is all around being a place for dialogue. And Grange has started to support farmers, so local agriculture rights, and as a community center as well. So us Grange members, we're small and mighty, about 20 members, and we enjoy hosting events like this for discussion, for dialogue, and also hosting events throughout the year that deal with agriculture, like seed exchanges. We're planning another pie event, and I'll talk a little bit more about some events coming up at the end, um, and and some other projects going on with the Grange. But with that, I also want to kind of set some guidelines for today. We do, if you will be here for about an hour, and if you have to use the restroom or anything, feel free to go. The session is being recorded for everybody that is hopping on. And I want to acknowledge KBOO as a sponsor. I know if I've already heard that a few people heard this event on KBOO and the speech. So thank you, KBOO, for advertising this event. And I'm sure we've got some people from Portland from that marketing. And thank you everybody that gave a donation when you registered. So donations will be split between Silverton Grange and Ahjamu today. And donations will be open for another week or so. So if you'd like to give an additional donation, or you weren't able to when you registered, you are welcome to do that. And I will put the link to do that within the meeting chat as well. And so far we've raised around $380. So thank you everybody for participating in that. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rose to talk a little bit about Silverton People for Peace.
Well, again, welcome to the 19th annual MLK Observance. Silverton People for Peace promotes peace and reconciliation to encourage nonviolent resolution of conflict at all levels. We formed during the buildup to the Iraq War in 2002, holding candlelight vigils at Town Park in downtown Silverton. We continue to hold monthly vigils, and this afternoon's vigil featured quotes from Martin Luther King. Please join us at our regular monthly vigils on the last Monday of the month, and our next one is February 28th. By 2003, we began an annual observance of Martin Luther King Day, co-sponsored with the Silverton Grange. We also participate in the parade of the annual Homer Davenport Days, the first weekend of August, when Silverton People for Peace carries a giant dove patterned after a Jane Goodall design. Our parade entry has won several blue ribbons, and here's a picture of it by Joan Moorhead. And like other organizations, we've carried on virtually due to COVID. Occasionally, we sponsor film speakers and activities about social justice, and you can reach us on Facebook. One of the civil rights activists who worked with Martin Luther King was Maya Angelou. She was an award-winning writer and actor, among other endeavors, for over 50 years. And I'd like to read one of her short poems, My Guilt. My guilt is slavery's chains, too long. The clang of the iron falls down the years. This brother's sold, this sister's gone, is bitter wax lining my ears. My guilt made music with the tears. My crime is heroes dead and gone. Dead Versailles, Turner, Gabrielle. Dead Malcolm, Marcus, Martin King. They fought too hard, they loved too well. My crime is I'm alive to tell. My sin is hanging from a tree. I do not scream, it makes me proud. I take to dying like a man. I do it to impress the crowd. My sin lies in not screaming loud. And to read another poem is another member of Silverton People for Peace, Robert Sisk.
Thank you, Rose. So this is going to go out to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who are shooting billions of dollars into space while we could use those billions of dollars right on Earth here to improve the human welfare, the human condition. And it's by Gil Scott Heron. It's called Whitey's on the Moon. A rat done bet my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bill, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. The man just upped my rent last night because Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me, because Whitey's on the moon? I was already paying him $50 a week with Whitey on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. Junkies making me a damn wreck. Junkies making the price of food is going up. And as if all that shit wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell. But Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come there ain't no money here? Whitey's on the moon. You know, I just about had my fill of Whitey on the moon. I think I'll send those doctor bills airmail special to Whitey on the moon. We are honored to have our first keynote speaker, Ahjamu Umi, back at a time when this year's address, Does American Identity Equal White Supremacy, seems to be becoming a scary fact. Fortunately, Ahjamu is a leading voice against racism and white supremacy, and he has a long history of fighting for oppressed peoples. But Ahjamu is also intent on training the oppressed to fight for their own rights, identity, and welfare. No surprise, he is an avid supporter of Pan-Africanism, the movement to unite all of Africa in pursuit of a common identity, destiny, and an independent, secure, and egalitarian economy. Ahjamu, what a pleasure to have you here tonight, and we'll just take it from there. You got a good presentation ready for us, I know. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob, and I'm glad to see you, and thank you for inviting me again, and greetings, everybody. Glad to be here. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just gonna go right into it and share this presentation with you and just get underway. So essentially, like Rob said, I'm an organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party. That's my political party. I've been a member of this party for going on 38 years. I've organized for them all over the African continent on the ground, Europe, the Caribbean, and all across this country. And I've also written multiple books. I'm a prolific blogger, and you can talk more about that in a second, but I want to get right into the material. And then just for this discussion, there's a couple of ground rules that I like to use. I like to just ask the question, you can think about it in your mind. What does the weight bench symbolize there? And I would respond by saying the weight bench represents that life is about struggle. And so often we're trained in this society by this capitalist system that we should do everything we can to avoid conflict and struggle. And I would argue that conflict and struggle is a part of life. So just like exercise, just like parenting, just like being in a relationship, and anything worthwhile you could think of, if you don't have struggle, you don't make progress. Or as Frederick Douglass said, there is no struggle there is no progress without struggle. So we don't run from struggle, we run to it. And so this conversation for some of you may be difficult, but you should not run away from that, because we use science as our basis of analysis, meaning we have experimentation. We engage the experiment the same way with the same variables every time, and we look at the results. So that's what we base our analysis on. We don't base it on what your uncle said or what somebody said that's from Cuba or some other backward kind of analysis. We base it on science and facts. So that's where we come from, what we have to say. And the material is hard hitting. If you feel triggered, think about the basis of your feelings. Like if you just feel triggered because you heard something you don't want to hear, then you got work to do. But if you feel triggered because you feel like something I'm presenting is wrong, then I'm happy. I'm here to talk about that and happy to tell you where you're confused. So just keep that in mind, and then push ourselves. Like just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean that we should surrender to it. Like a lot of times in society today, people say, "Well, I feel attacked." Well, you may be very well attacked, or it may just be your issue that you need to work through. So just think about why that's happening, and let's just try not to react to it. And so the foundation of what we're saying here today in this presentation is the question of what is white supremacy or racism? Like, what is it? What actually does that mean? Because there are all kind of different definitions out there. So what I want to do is challenge that. And I want to argue that the definition I'm going to use for the next few minutes is that white supremacy or racism is a system of institutionalized oppression against colonized people. And by colonized people, I mean what you would call people of color. Now, why do I say that? Why is that the definition we're using? Isn't it an attitude? Isn't it anybody that can be racist or anybody can practice racial discrimination against someone else? And I would say no, absolutely not, because it's a systematic thing based on the issues of prejudice plus power. And so if there's no power, there's no ability to institutionally oppress or discriminate against anyone. So I'm not concerned about whether you like me or don't like me because of how I look. I could care less about that because I'm a pretty intelligent human being. I think I'm reasonably good looking. I think I have a decent personality. So if you don't like me, that's your problem. That's not my concern. My concern is that how I proceed in this society, that there not be undue obstacles that prevent me from reaching my full potential because of who I am. And so I say that these are institutionalized, and that's the definition of white supremacy. Just like I say the definition of patriarchy is it's an institutional system of male domination. So I'm not going to insult any women or any marginalized gender people by saying I'm not sexist, I'm not patriarchal. Every institution in this society is sexist and patriarchal. So the best I can do is say I'm struggling every day against patriarchy, which I do to the best of my ability. And by the same token, if you're European or white, you can't tell me, well, I'm not racist. Of course you are. Every institution in this society is racist. So the best you can do is struggle against that. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's really irrefutable. And if we had more time, we could definitely talk about how it's irrefutable. So that's, just so you understand, that's the basis of where we're coming from for the next few minutes. So what drives white supremacy? What drives this institution of oppression? How is it that? What makes that up? And what I would argue is we start with the question of what is the dominant economic system in the world today, where the majority of people on earth, 7 billion people, sit under the system. And the answer to that is capitalism. There isn't a scientific argument to say that any other economic system is dominant in the world today. Without question, capitalism is dominant. And we would argue that capitalism, the definition we're going to use, is it's an economic system where the means of production, the water, the air, the resources, everything we need to live and survive are owned and controlled by private interests for private profit. That's our definition of capitalism. The means of production are owned and controlled by private interests for private profit. So the question there is, where did capitalism originate from? And people say, well, I don't know. Even though it's a dominant system in the world, the education system in this country is not really designed to educate us, so we don't know that. So I'm going to say that capitalism evolved from the transatlantic slave trade, which is the reason I'm sitting here in California talking to you, speaking English today. That is the reason why I'm here. That's the reason why that happened. And it's called transatlantic because it had 3 legs to it. It had the leg where, and I know a lot of the right wing like their talking points now are that, well, Africans sold Africans into slavery. Certainly in the late 1400s until the early 1500s, that was a phenomenon. But by the early 1500s, we had Britain, France, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Spain. We had all of these countries scrambling to control parts of Africa. So this method was no longer sufficient. It was not sufficient. And so these folks figured out, well, I don't have to negotiate with anybody. I can just go into the countryside and kidnap people. So clearly from the early 1500s through the early 1800s, the dominant form in which people were forced to participate in slavery was through this kidnapping process. And this happened when people came there. That was the first leg of the triangle. The second leg was kidnapping the people, bringing them to the Western Hemisphere. And the third leg was the people picked cotton, sugarcane, hemp, a number of materials. And the question is, and that third leg was the wealth that came from what those resources being picked were shipped to Europe. So what happened to that money? Where did it go? And that's the answer to the question of where did capitalism originate from, is it fueled the industrialization period, which created mechanization, which created the capitalist system. So my point for all of this is that the wealth in this country was built on two things: stolen land, this land stolen from indigenous people, and stolen labor, my ancestors, my African ancestors. Well, how can you prove that? Easily. So if you look at all of these, if you look to the left, like you look at all of these entities here, like Aetna Insurance and the entire insurance industry in Europe and the US, Canada, etc., started from the enslavement of my ancestors. Aetna themselves started from selling people premiums. We were property. So selling people premiums on our ancestors. That's how it started. It's like you insure your car, your house, or whatever. New York Life, all of them started that way. All of the banks, Barclays banks, all of them started by money provided by the transatlantic slave trade. And this is not my opinion. Like, you can look this, all you have to do is Google Barclays, slavery, and see what comes up. Aetna, slavery, because all of these companies have had to admit their role in what I'm talking to you about because of the pressure of the reparations movement. So you might say, okay, I acknowledge that, that's true, but that was 400 years ago. So why are we talking about that in 2022? Because that system of colonialism and slavery established the economic exploitation that continues to this day. So the diamond industry in Africa comes from Zimbabwe, the Congo, what we call Azania. That's what African people call South Africa, is a colonial name the Germans gave it. But all of those countries in Central and Southern Africa produce the bulk of the diamonds in the world. But nobody in those countries is benefiting from that wealth. Instead, Israel, Zionist Israel, controls 40% of the polished diamond industry in the world. And there's not a single diamond mine in occupied Palestine. So this is how the system was put in place to continue this type of exploitation. And then we look at whatever device you're participating in this program in right now, it would not work without columbite tantalite, or what they call coltan for short. 75% of the coltan reserves in the world are in the Congo. And you have kids right now, 12 years old, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, making the equivalent of $30 US a week to dig this rare mineral out by hand so that Apple, Samsung, all of these people can, make billions of dollars, and the people in the Congo get nothing. Brooks Brothers suits started by wearing clothes for my ancestors to wear on the plantation. I mean, they've had to, that's not me saying that, they've acknowledged that. So you have all of these industries today. 75% of the cocoa chocolate products in this country come from the exploitative cocoa industry in Ghana, the same type of exploitation I described about the coltan industry in the Congo. So there isn't really a plausible argument to deny the fact that much of the wealth in this country, as I stated, is here because of the exploitation of Africa. And so just keep that in mind, because the reason why we have white supremacy is it was a myth that was created to justify everything I just got through talking about. And it's based in the concept that colonized people are less than Europeans and therefore need guidance from Europeans. So this is the whole concept behind manifest destiny, and all of these racist concepts is based in this belief that Europeans had to civilize the savages, or as the great indigenous scholar Vine Deloria said, when the white man got here, we had the land, he had the Bible. Once he got here, he got the land and we got the Bible. So this is why this happened, because Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all of the great Greek philosophers, they studied, they went to Mali. They wrote about it in their memoirs. They went there. Mali had the world's first university, Timbuktu. My mother used to, I'll send you to Timbuktu as a joke because we didn't know what Timbuktu was. It's the world's first university. That's what it is. And it's in Africa, West Africa. And these European philosophers went there and studied. So they knew Africa wasn't primitive. They knew that the Americas weren't primitive, but they created this myth to justify the theft, murder, and the stealing of the wealth that I just got through talking about in the last slide. So it's based in this concept that colonized people haven't made a tangible contribution to world civilization. Like we're just here, we're on the coattails of European society. And that's the reason why, you know, all of us can talk about how we learned about the round table in Britain, how we learned about Greek and Roman mythology and all that, but very few of us know anything of substance about African history. We don't know anything of substance about the Americas before 1492. And that's, none of that is an accident. It's because that's a part of the justification to justify what is happening. The savages needed civilization, and that was only going to happen through European Judeo-Christianity. And so it's based in the belief that US wealth is not the result of theft, murder, it's the result of hard work and Christian values. And it's, although it's rarely said out loud, being white, that's really what's being said. Like, if you look at what the right wing is saying, that's really what underneath what they're saying is that we're white, we're the ones who built everything, y'all didn't do anything but sit on our coattails, and so we should be the ones who own this country and benefit everything. This has been, you can't just blame the people who went to DC on January 6th last year, because this has been the basis of every institution in this society for 500 years. It's been the foundation of this country. When people say, go back to Africa, that's what they're talking about, or go back to your country. That's what they're saying, is that you're not responsible for anything positive that's happening here, so you can just leave as if we made no contribution to the society. And that's what white supremacy is all about. So why is the myth still effective 500 years later? And the reason why is that European people or white people, following up on Rob's poem, which I thought was outstanding, are still committed to white supremacy. Even a lot of you who are good people still embrace white supremacist value. Well, Ahjamu, how can you say that? Well, I'm going to show you how I can say that. Because this entire system is based upon you upholding white supremacy. So it has so many vehicles and vessels designed to ensure that that's what's happened. This entire system is based on hoodwinking the white working class. So what do I mean by that? The European ruling capitalist class has convinced the majority of white people, I don't care if they're in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, doesn't matter. It's convinced the majority of white people that their interests and the interests of the ruling class are one and the same. Or as Kwame Ture said years ago, the Democratic Party is the only party where millionaires and homeless people belong to the same party and think they have the same interests. What am I talking about? So 150 years ago, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and slavery allegedly effectively ended in this country. And what happened? The plantation industries in the southern US told white working class people, sorry, we can't do anything for you. We can't pay you any money because now we have to pay these people. They used to work for free. Now we got to pay them, so we don't have any money to pay you. And the majority of white people at that time in this country, they didn't say, no, we don't want to hear, we want to see the books. We want to see the books before we accept that explanation. Instead, we got the Ku Klux Klan. That's a fact. That's irrefutable. That's what happened 150 years ago. Fast forward to today, 150 years later. What's the dominant narrative? Well, we can't pay you, white people, because these immigrants are taking your jobs. We can't pay you. White people today,
Is anybody, and well, we want to see the books. We don't believe that. We think that's a lot. No. Instead, well, the Mexicans are the reason why we have these problems. Blah, 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 blah. So the same strategy has worked for 150 years. Why should it change? It should, they're going to continue to use it as long as it's effective. And the reason why it's effective is that the majority of European people in this country are committed to upholding white supremacy. So the question is it possible to be against white supremacy while maintaining your American identity? And what I mean by that, to be 100% clear, is if you call yourself an American in any way, form, shape, or fashion, is it possible for you to do that and still say, I'm against white supremacy? And I am going to present an argument here about that based on American identity. And what I'm going to say is that this society was founded on the principles of theft and murder that I talked about. So I know we want to believe these myths. This was a free and democratic country. But I know I didn't flunk math in school. So I know the Emancipation Proclamation, even if you argue that that ended slavery and made us free, I don't agree. But even if you, let's, for the sake of argument, let's say that. That was in 1863. The Declaration of Independence was 1776. That's 87 years after the Declaration of Independence. So you'd have to be either you flunked math or you're a fool or both if you expect me to feel like the 4th of July and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is somehow supposed to represent me, that those are my founding fathers. They were all slaveholders. They enslaved my ancestors. But yet all the time, this is what we get. These are your forefathers. Happy 4th of July, have a 4th. And I don't celebrate the 4th of July. It's a day of mourning for me. And people look at me like they don't understand because miseducation is the dominant thing in this society. White supremacy is necessary to uphold the empire. That's how this system works. So the way that so many good people buy into that is, well, we did that. We sent troops to Afghanistan. I tell people I didn't send no troops nowhere. I'm not for any of the military action that this country engages in. In fact, I want my tax dollars to go to education, to care for the elderly, care for the physically challenged, to programs to wipe out domestic violence. Those are the things I want my tax dollars to. More resources for the youth. I have no need for an intercontinental ballistic missile. I don't know about you, but I never woke up and said, I need an ICBM in my life today. But yet, that's where 50% of your tax revenues go to, the U.S. military. So we didn't do that. I ain't have nothing to do with that. I'm against it 100%. So stop saying we did this, because when you do that, you're justifying it. You're normalizing it. You're saying that you're a part of it and you agree with it. Even if you're saying, I don't agree with invasion in Afghanistan, you're saying, but other than that, I'm with them. That's what you're saying when you say we did this. And then a little deeper, holidays. Look at the holiday. I just talked about the 4th of July, as we call it. Look at Thanksgiving. I mean, you're celebrating. The only purpose of that is to normalize the theft of land. And I'll tell you a quick story. I know we only have a few more minutes, and I respect the time. But my daughter and I went to my aunt's house last year on Thanksgiving, and there were kids there. We wanted to have a discussion. We didn't want to just sit down and eat food. We want to get our family thinking. So what we did is we went there and we took 2 rolls of quarters. And there were kids there. None of the kids lived in the house. They were all visiting like we were. And when nobody was looking, we threw the quarters on the floor. And then the children came in the room. We summoned the children. They came in the room. And what do you think the children said? Did they say, well, somebody dropped quarters. We better try to find them and pick them up and find the rightful owners of them? No, we found some money. We found some money. So what that tells you is that the whole point of that holiday is to normalize the concept that if you see something and you take it, then that means it belongs to you, regardless of who was there first or what they were doing or any of that. It belongs to you. And so even though they don't have to tell these kids that in that way today, the values are institutionalized in this society, and we all perpetuate it. We all do that. We sit down on that day, and some of us might say, well, it's Friendsgiving, but you're still perpetuating the general concept of what they want you to perpetuate, even if you try not to. Look at the sports teams. Now, I'm from San Francisco, born and raised. Love the 49ers. That's my team. But listen to what that's saying. The 49ers? I mean, are you serious? The Indians? The Portland Trailblazers? I mean, white supremacy is in every aspect of what happens in this society. And this is going to really step on some toes. Veterans Day. So you're telling me, and I know some of you, I'm sure, served in the U.S. military, but again, you can't refute what I'm about to say to you, because we're not talking about sentimentality. We're talking about the truth. And that's the problem in this society. Is truth is completely divorced from material reality. Truth and justice and material reality should be the same thing, and they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So what I was taught and what I hear every day in this society is that the U.S. military fights for my freedom. Now, I grew up in housing projects in Hunters Point in San Francisco. So I need somebody to explain to me, my childhood was living terror. So I need someone to explain to me how someone going into Vietnam is giving me rights. And my father, who was one of the first troops drafted into the Army in the early 60s to go to Vietnam, came back and told me that I should never join the U.S. military because he went over there and he's from Louisiana and he couldn't even live where he wanted to live in Louisiana. He couldn't work where he wanted to work in Louisiana. He couldn't go to school where he wanted to go to school. That's why he had to join the military. Well, he didn't have a choice. He was drafted. But my point is that his message was, there's no democracy in this country. So why did I go to Vietnam? I shouldn't go. He'd say that when he was drinking because the whole process made him drink himself to death, literally. So you cannot make a tangible argument about Veterans Day being about, if you really wanted to honor people in the U.S. military, you should start with the ones on the freeway on-ramps. But we drive right by them because we don't really what people are saying when they say support our troops is, as long as, if you go over there and get your limbs blown off or killed, as long as my life is comfortable, that's really what I'm concerned about. And I have too many people I've driven to the VA and seen them go through all that bureaucracy to get nothing to see it any different. So, the question is how you identify yourself determines what interests you will pursue and what you will fight for. So it's important that we recognize that and not perpetuate what I would call these frauds. And the frauds are that nobody is American here, not even indigenous people. This is a country based on theft and murder. So for me, people, well, what are you? Are you an African American? I'm like, no, I'm not no African American. I'm an African in America fighting against capitalism. So a lot of young white activists, I work with them all over the world, and they always ask me, well, what should I say? And I tell them, you should say you're a person from Europe fighting against injustice or fighting against whatever way you want. I mean, you feel much better about yourself, identifying yourself that way. I don't even know why you would want to say, well, I'm American. I mean, I don't get that. I don't understand it. But some of you may understand it. I don't know. But I think it all it does is perpetuate the problem. So for those that might think, well, he hates white people. No, understand this woman on the screen. This is Marilyn Buck, and I'm almost done. But this is Marilyn Buck. She was a member of the Weather Underground. She wrote she was a member of Students for Democratic Society. She wrote the statement condemning patriarchy, sexism in Students for Democratic Society. It led to one of the huge splits in 1969 in SDS, and the weathermen came out of that. And eventually, because of the work they were doing, they had to go underground. They became known as the Weather Underground. And the FBI calls Marilyn the only white member of the Black Liberation Army. Well, she did 33 years in prison they convicted her of helping Assata Shakur escape. Assata Shakur has been in Cuba since 1984. And I went to Cuba, met Assata Shakur. I got a video on YouTube because people, I don't believe you met Assata. There's a video on YouTube of me interviewing her. If you want to see it, it's Assata Shakur talks about socialism in Cuba. But my point is that I had a personal relationship with Marilyn Buck on the screen here. I used to visit her in prison all the time. My daughter grew up wanting to see her. My daughter calls her to this day Auntie Marilyn. And she is a shining example to me because they would offer her parole and they would tell her, all you have to do is tell us who helped you with Assata Shakur, or they call her Joanne Chesimard because they don't recognize our African names. And she would never tell them. And she spent 33 years. And then she got out in 2010, 3 weeks, she had cancer and passed away. So I just love and respect this woman. And I think she is a great role model for white people who really say they want to fight for justice. I'm not saying you got to go to prison 30 years, but the principles that this woman lived by, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we need more of in our fight for justice. We need more of that. And again, identity is so important. How do you see yourself dictates what you will and what you won't do. And if you're dedicated to the American system of capitalism, then you will never entertain anything that goes beyond its boundaries. And I'm here to tell you, we have got to entertain everything that goes beyond its values, because clearly what's happening within the confines of the capitalist system is not working for any of us. And so it's not about left versus right. It's not, I'm like Malcolm X. I'm not a student of politics. I'm not a politician. I'm neither a Democrat, nor a Republican, nor an American. And I got sense enough to know it. That's what he said. And I agree with that 100%. It's about the haves versus the have-nots. But the question is, who is going to organize the white working class masses? Who's going to do that? And so the last thing I'll say, you all, is I want to encourage you, like, I hope nobody's mad. But if you are, you got to look at why you're mad, because you can't refute what we just got to tell you. You can't say, well, this is wrong because of this. I mean, you might think you do, but we'll have time for a little question and answer, and let's get into it, because we have to engage these tough questions. But if you're of the mindset where you're like, okay, I understand enough of that so that I think it makes sense, then here are the ways you can support anti-colonial work. Okay, the first way I'm going to suggest is I have a book here that talks a lot more about what I've talked about here than I've been able to do in this short time. It's called A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's right there on the screen in the upper right, middle. And I asked people to order it. I'm using this book. I've worked with people in 7 states. I'm working with people currently in Southern Africa and Germany to organize in their communities against oppression. LGBTQ people, women, colonized people, all types of folks who need to organize. That's the work this book is about. So it's only $8 US dollars. So I ask people, we use the money to do our work. Unfortunately, it's only available through Amazon. I understand people have a problem with Amazon. I got a problem with Amazon. I got a problem with Shell Oil, but I still go there. I have to go there to get gas in my car. I got a problem when I was in Oregon with Fred Meyer, but I still got to go there to get groceries. When I'm here in Safeway, I still got to go there. But we're using the system to spread the word. And I've been able to sell thousands of these books. So please support that. It's very important. And then we have a store. You can see my ugly mug there under the book. And we have sweatshirts and t-shirts. If you want to support the All African People's Revolutionary Party work all over the world, you can go to that site and buy one of those items. It's very important to do that. And we appreciate it if you do that. And then support all of our independent revolutionary work. Right now, I'm asking people to support one of our sibling parties in Africa, the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists. You go to their Facebook page and support their work. We have a number of organizations like that. And we just ask you to support independent, revolutionary, Pan-African work, because it's based on principles of justice, and that's what we stand for. So with that, I will stop, and we hopefully still have some time for comments, questions, and answers. You don't have to agree with me. I am not that thin-skinned. I want to raise this challenge. And so whatever people have to say, whatever time we have, this is the time to do it. Don't be shy.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you. You're awesome as well. Thank you.
He also just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Or actually, I should say Asante Sana.
Yes, Asante Sana. I don't speak much Swahili. I do speak fluent Akan, so I would say Bedasi Yafreme Ahjamu Akwaba. Thank you.
Ahjamu, could you give us a little bit of insight into the challenges in Africa for solidarity, to create its own destiny and shake off the shackles of colonialism? I know you've taken several trips there.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you, Rob. So the dominant problem in Africa, we believe today, is neocolonialism. So colonialism is that the European countries came there, set up their system, their political economic systems, and they dominated. Yeah, that's true. And that was devastating for the continent. But the problem is that once they left after the so-called independence, they still have the systems in place to ensure that their interests are represented. In fact, France still collects payments from what they call the Francophone countries, Mali, Senegal, Guinea, all of the countries that France colonized, even Haiti. They require those countries to pay them for colonizing them. So this is still the problem, because all of the political leaders in Africa today are there to serve capitalist interests, Western capital. They're not there to serve the interests of people. So if you look at the conflict in Ethiopia, just as a quick example, what's happening, Ethiopia is completely unstable right now because the prime minister there is trying to preserve his power and his position. And he's got the Eritrean people have already split off because it's a scarcity model, because the model in these countries is to use all of the vast resources to enrich the capitalist corporations and a few individuals, the bourgeois, the national bourgeoisie there. So there's not enough for the people. So the Eritrean people formed their own country in the 90s. Now the Tigray people want to do the same thing. The Oromo people want to do the same thing. So this is a serious problem. That's why Sudan split. Same thing. We can go all over the continent and see that. So what we say to that is that the solution is that Africa has the means to address every problem. There isn't a scarcity model. The problem is that the resources in Africa are not controlled by Africa. They're controlled by multinational corporations. So we want to drive them out. And when we do that, we can begin to have the resources to address the problems that exist. So someone says, can you, China's role in Africa? Absolutely. So China is engaged in Africa. You cannot go to any part in Africa and not see them. But this is important to say, like the Western capitalist press is trying to promote the narrative that China, they're anti-China because China's competing with them and they don't want any competition. So they want to create this anti-China sentiment. So part of their narrative is that China is colonizing Africa. Well, who would know better than the actual colonizers? But I would argue that China's role in Africa, even though it's not what we want, it's not what we want to see happen. Let me make that clear, but it's not the same thing as European and US involvement in Africa either, because what China's trying to do, they got 1 billion people there. They're trying to feed their people. They're trying to build their system so that they can do that and be productive. So they need resources to do that. So they trade resources for building infrastructure. So they're building roads, they're building water facilities, they're building things. Colonialism never did any of that. Colonialism never contributed anything to Africa. In fact, when France left Guinea in 1958, they were so mad that Guinea demanded independence and didn't want to stay in the French Union that they even stole the electrical sockets when they left the country. So China's not, to say China's the same as France and Germany and Britain, that's just not true. Again, it's not what we want, but it's a totally different thing. They're providing much needed infrastructure in Africa. They built airports there. I've been to a number of the airports they built, and we need that in Africa. So it's a different thing. It's a challenge that we have to sort out. I want to respect your time there. I don't know, maybe we have time for one more, if there is one. Let's see, I'm seeing something. Oh, someone is saying, I'm sorry?
Oh, I see you have a question in the chat. If you have room for another question after that, I'm Elmarie
Yeah,
Parker,
let's
and
run
I
through
have a
that and then
question.
we can make you laugh if that's okay with everyone. So their question in the chat is, how can we re-educate centrist Democrats who believe just voting a Democrat will change the white supremacist narrative? That is an outstanding question. And what I would, I just got through, to answer your question, I just got through seeing Reverend William Barber on TV just now. I don't know if you know, he's one of the leaders of the Poor People's Campaign. And my argument, like I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, but for those of you that are, I'm not telling you not to be a member of the Democratic Party. What I am telling you is that the reason why you all have seen the picture of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King shaking hands. It's the only time they ever met each other. Everyone's seen that picture. But people don't know the background behind that picture. That picture took place on March 26, 1964. It took place
in the Senate chambers, in the US Senate in Washington, D.C. The reason why it took place is because Dr. King was there to push the senators to vote for the Civil Rights Bill. That's why he was there. And the reason why he wasn't there as an individual, he was there representing the same civil rights movement that had deconstructed segregation laws throughout the South, the same civil rights movement that it had all those victories that you all already know about, that it assembled 250,000 people in Washington, D.C. in the speech you saw in the beginning of this program. So that had leverage. So the problem today is we don't have any movement. All I hear is vote, 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 vote. And there's no way to hold these people accountable to us. Now you have, it's insulting to me as an intelligent African that you want to talk to me about my ability to vote in 2022. I'm not even playing that game. Run these people the hell out of there. Like, let's get organized and do that. But we can only do that if we build a movement. That's what has to happen. And I thank you. And I'll let your question, let's make your question the last one.
Thank you so much for answering that. I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Ahjamu, for your lecture tonight. And one of the things that you were talking about is mobilizing the white working class, and that ties in with your comments that you were making just a moment ago about creating a movement. And I was just wondering, from your perspective, what would you suggest as helpful starting points for that? What do you think are the necessary foundations for working with the white working class and creating that kind of movement?
Yeah, so I want to say my book was written specifically to address that. And what I'm doing is, like, we had a young white woman, 23 years old, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who came to one of our orientations where you have to be African to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So they told her that, but they sent her to me. And so I told her the same message I'm telling you all today. And she got 15 people together, and we built a political education program for them. And we're talking about work that they can do in white communities in Pennsylvania. And I just met with them Wednesday doing that, the third meeting they've had. So there is a lot of hope out here. These are all young people, so I'd love to talk to you more. Rob knows how to contact me. I'd love to talk to you or anyone interested in that, but I want to respect you all's time. I just want to close. There were two comments I just certainly want to acknowledge here. One is from Kurt, saying, I'm a veteran. I want to thank you for everything you said. You voiced a lot of things I felt myself. And I just want to say, Kurt, I appreciate you saying that, because I have seen those of you who have had to suffer from what they forced you to experience. And I don't blame you at all. I think it's a disgrace that people want to have this superficial respect for these people and not give them any of the concrete support that they need so that they can live stable and comfortable lives. And we need to call that out and stop having this superficial, I support my troops. You don't support anything except your comfortable life, and you don't care what happens to anybody as long as that happens. And the other comment is, I hope your message gets out to white supremacists. And I would say to that, sir, without question, that is happening, because I'm ruthlessly pursued by these people. And I tell them all the time, like, you all got to do what you got to do. But I know, I'll just say this, I've done a lot of work with the Rural Organizing Project when I was in Oregon, and I still work with them. I was just up there in July doing a training for them. And, they do outstanding work against white supremacy in the state of Oregon. And when I was up there doing the work with them, we talked about this. And one of the things that came out of it is that when I was going on tour doing security for them, for Jessica Campbell, who's a wonderful friend of mine and an outstanding activist. And one of the events where she was speaking, where I was doing security, one of the young white men who was a member of the Oath Keepers, he had his paraphernalia on him. He wouldn't leave my side. And I'm like, what is this boy? What this boy want? So I'm like, well, I'm going to engage him. So I asked him, so why are you in the Oath Keepers? And he told me that the guy that raised him, he was 20 years old at the time. He told me the guy that raised him is an Oath Keeper, and his parents were killed in a car wreck when he was a little kid. And so that's what he knew. This guy raised him. So I thought, well, if we had somebody else working with him, he probably wouldn't be an Oath Keeper. So that's why I'm saying we need white people going to reach young people like that, so they don't get caught up in that kind of, decadent, backward lifestyle. So I'll stop there.
Thank you all very much.
There's-
Appreciate you.
Yep, one more, Ahjamu. And
Okay.
I would also say that all of us that identify as white, we are white supremacists. We are part of that culture, and so I'm going to say that as well. And so there's one more question in here. I think it just got skipped, and we do have time for this one. And
Okay.
I would like to end it from Teresa. Do you see? Well, she said, "Thank you so much. I look forward to sharing the link to your talk. I also have a question. If you have time, do you see there ever being an anti-oppressive American identity, and what would that take?"
So I think that I think I understand what you're trying to get to, but you know, we have to accept the fact that when we embrace any form of American identity, we're erasing the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And so I don't want to do that. And then not only that, but we're signing on to the imperialist agenda of the American government. So I don't know why you would want to, there's no compromise with that, and there doesn't need to be. Let's talk about different ways that we can create an identity. And a lot of young white activists, particularly, they tell me, well, I don't know how to identify, and they're wonderful people. So I tell them, well, just create your own identity, or, you know, let's do some research, figure it out. We can figure it out, but you don't need to identify in any way with this. This doesn't help you doing that. It doesn't, all it does is perpetuate things that we all agree we need to get rid of.
Thank you. And I saw some people clapping, and just because it's so quiet on Zoom sometimes, but I feel like we need to make some noise. So I encourage everybody to take yourself off mute and let's do some cheers. Thank you, Ahjamu.
Yay.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Bravo.
All right. Well, we have a few minutes. There's 3 minutes until we'll just close up. And I just wanted to share if there's any announcements. I know there are some people here that are involved in some local racial and social justice groups. And I just want to give about 3 minutes of anybody who is involved in some work to let us know, and if there's any way that we can support or engage locally. Jamie, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I've spoken to the group before. My name is Jamie McLeod Skinner. I'm running for Congress in the newly drawn 5th Congressional District. And so just a lot of the points we made, I'm trying to bring some of that honesty, integrity to Congress. So Jamie for Oregon, if people are interested to reach out, but just really, really appreciate everyone putting this event on. You know, this having our government live up to the promise of founding documents, because we haven't, is really key. So really appreciate the comments tonight.
Thank you, Jamie. And good luck with that race. Thank you for running and serving. In the chat here, there's statewide criminal justice reform advocacy, see Partnerships for Safety and Justice. I know there's some groups here from Surge, folks here showing up for racial justice. Would anybody like to share a little bit about that group? I'm also happy to.
I just could say we have a local chapter of Surge, which is showing up for racial justice, which is like primarily a way for white folks to engage in social justice work by taking the lead from BIPOC organizations that already have been doing this work for a long time. And we have a Silverton chapter that right now is trying to figure out, we've been together for a year and a half or so and are trying to figure out the best way to keep organizing together. And we're all in those talks right now, but if you're interested in joining, Jordan and Kayla and Emily and Michael and Adam are all part of that group that are here tonight. And yeah, we would love to have some new faces. It's all local engagement, and from getting money pulled together for different organizations, or getting soup out to neighbors who need it, or working with the school board or whatever it is, the local farmers market. We're trying to, make Silverton a place where everyone wants to live and feels safe living here.
Thank you, Alyssa. And also shout out, I know another activity going on in Silverton. We talked a little bit about youth, and there is a group of people that is bringing youth together to have some facilitated one-on-one conversations, as well as a safe place to share and listen. And I'm unsure of the group that is doing that. I know it's Sarah White, but I don't know if it's an organized group. So that is also happening in our community.
If anyone wants to know about that, it is Sarah White that's organizing that, and it's mainly students from Silverton High School that are getting together to just voice complaints about the unsafe culture that they're living in, and getting community support for hearing their concerns and working with the school. And I don't know how to best get information out because it's not an organized group, but Sarah White from Sheltering Silverton is the lead organizer. So you can contact her through Sheltering Silverton.
Thank you. So as we're talking about these social justice issues and conversations, I do want to share. So part of what Silverton Grange, what we do is host these type of conversations, and we like to do that. And even before the pandemic, we were having movies and discussions, and we do have a film coming up called Food Chains. And I did want to share, it's about a 3-minute preview of that movie, and that is coming up on February 6th, that we'll do a movie and discussion. So Lee, would you like to share that movie?
I would, and this is a really exciting opportunity. This film is called Food Chains, The Revolution in America's Fields, and it follows the life of farm workers working in the fields in America, and it's very powerful. There's a lot of people that appear in it, like Dolores Huerta, that was with Cesar Chavez and Robert Kennedy, etc. But the important thing about this film is it also comes at a really timely time, February 6th, Sunday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. There's a bill in the Oregon legislature in February that looks at giving overtime for the first time to farm workers in Oregon. And the sponsor of that bill, Representative Andrea Salinas, will be one of our speakers at the event. An organizer from Picun, the Farm Workers Union, will be at the event. And Jim Bernal, who's the CEO of Willamette Valley Vineyards, who is going to go ahead of the law and start paying his people overtime and has provided a lot of great benefits for his workers at the Willamette Valley Vineyards, will also be on it. So it's going to be an interesting, multifaceted discussion. So we have a 3-minute preview I'm going to play momentarily, and we're leading out with that, or did you want to say anything else, Kayla?
We can leave it with that.
Okay, this is previews of coming attractions from my previous work as a theater owner. Food Chains, and we'll be sending out flyers, and you can sign on for the to see this movie. Already I sent out to a lot of lists today.
Lee, there's no sound.
Oh, okay, stop. Let's try it again. Share screen. Optimize video clip. Share. Stop share. Share screen. Oh, too bad we've lost it now. Oh no.
Lee, I can just put the link in the chat here.
Yeah,
watch
would you put the link in the chat? I'm sorry, I had it all set up, but I goofed. So this film is very powerful. Come and join us and discuss with these people and again, I did want to remind folks that the Grange is not a political organization. We're a nonprofit, so we don't take positions on candidates, but thanks for Jamie McLeod Skinner for appearing, and thanks for your interest in issues like treating the farm workers right who pick the food we eat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I put the link, the information is on the Silverton Grange website with watching the trailer and registering for that event. So thank you all for joining us for this 19th MLK observance. I encourage everybody, it would be great to just say one thing you're taking away from this. You can either share it in the chat or take yourself off mute and share real quick one takeaway from our speaker this evening.